There is a space beneath the left front paw of the Great Sphinx of Giza that measures roughly 12 meters by 9 meters at a depth of 5 meters. 5 separate scientific teams have aimed instruments at the ground and found it. Not one of them has ever been permitted to look inside. 34 years of silence, applied to a peer-reviewed detection, beneath the single most scrutinized archaeological monument on the surface of the earth. And tonight, we are going to open that file. Welcome to the archive. Settle in, dim whatever lights remain. Let the weight of the night come down around you, because what we are about to explore is not simply a question about a void in the limestone beneath a famous statue. It is a question about what we are allowed to know, who decides what knowledge is permitted to surface, and what it means when the ground itself keeps speaking and no one is allowed to answer it. The Sphinx sits at the edge of the Giza Plateau, carved from the living rock of the Mokatam Formation. Limestone deposited roughly 50 million years ago when a warm, shallow sea covered what is now Egypt. It faces due east toward the rising sun, as it has for somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 years by conventional dating, and perhaps considerably longer by other measures we will return to. It is approximately 73 meters from tail to outstretched paws, 20 meters from base to crown. Its face, worn by centuries of wind and weather and the complicated attentions of human beings, gazes toward the horizon with an expression that has never quite resolved into anything we can easily name. Imagine standing before it at dusk, when the light comes low and amber across the plateau and the shadows of the limestone deepen into something that feels older than shadow itself. The tourists have gone. The vendors have folded their tables. The plateau settles into its ancient silence, the same silence it has held through the reigns of pharaohs and the campaigns of conquerors and the long indifferent centuries when no one came at all. And the face looks east, as it always has, patient in a way that no human face ever quite manages to be. Patient in the way of stone, patient in the way of something that has already outlasted everything and expects to outlast everything that remains. What is it guarding? What does it know that we do not? What lies beneath the paw that rests so quietly on the limestone of the plateau, pressing down on whatever the earth holds in that particular darkness? These are not new questions. They are among the oldest questions that human beings have aimed at this monument. And tonight, in the archive, we are going to follow them as far as they go. Before we go further into the archive tonight, if you find yourself drawn to these long, slow explorations of what history hides and what the official record leaves out, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like if the archive has earned it. And if you are listening in the dark somewhere, I would genuinely love to know where you are and what time it is for you right now. Drop it the comments. There is something quietly remarkable about imagining this silence stretching across the world, all of us gathered in our separate darknesses, leaning toward the same buried question. Now, let us begin with the stone itself. The Sphinx is not a sealed monolith. This surprises people who have never looked closely at the monument, who imagine it as a single unbroken mass of ancient rock sitting impassively on its plateau. The reality is considerably more layered, considerably more human, and in its own way, considerably more mysterious. At least 7 known openings penetrate the body of the Sphinx and its immediate surroundings. They have been documented across centuries of exploration. They are not secrets. They are not hidden. And yet, understanding them is essential to understanding why the question of what lies beneath the monument is not simply answered by pointing to these existing passages and saying, "There, we have already looked." Consider the head shaft first. At the very crown of the monument, a shaft roughly 5 feet square and 6 feet deep, first described by a German traveller named Johann Helfferich in 1565. It was almost certainly carved during the New Kingdom, that great era of Egyptian revival and reconstruction, to anchor a headdress ornament. Picture the craftsman who cut that shaft, suspended somehow above the crown of the monument, working in the heat of the Egyptian sun, their tools ringing against limestone that had already stood for 1,000 years before they touched it. They were not archaeologists. They were not historians. They were workers serving a pharaoh who wanted the Sphinx to look a certain way, who wanted to add something to what the ancestors had left. In 1926, a French engineer named Émile Barrès, who spent 11 years excavating and restoring the Sphinx, paved the shaft with cement and fitted it with a metal trapdoor that remains visible today. Every few years, an image of one of Barrés's iron trapdoors circulates across the internet, accompanied by breathless claims that Egyptologists are hiding access to secret chambers. The claims are false as regards these specific openings. Barrès documented everything he sealed. The trapdoors are in the archaeological record. But here is where the story begins to complicate itself. On the Sphinx's back, there is a shaft drilled in 1837 by a British officer named Howard Vyse. It extends 27 feet into the bedrock. Vyse was a man of his era, energetic and impatient, more interested in results than in careful methodology. And his approach to the Giza monuments was characterized by a willingness to use force where patience might have served better. When Vyse's drill rod became stuck partway down, he attempted to free it with gunpowder. The attempt failed. He abandoned it. In 1978 or so, was it in 1978, a young Zahi Hawass cleared the shaft and recovered a fragment of the Sphinx's ancient headdress from its interior, a piece of the original crown that had fallen and been preserved in the darkness of the shaft for over 3,000 years. A major natural fissure cuts through the waist of the monument, up to 2 meters wide with artificially squared sides. First excavated by Auguste Mariette in 1853 and sealed by Barrès in 1926. A very narrow crack continues deeper below the sealed floor, its full extent unknown. That phrase deserves a moment. Its full extent unknown. This is a crack in the body of the world's most famous statue, a crack that has been known about for over a century and a half, and its full depth has never been determined. Mariette looked into it. Barrès sealed above it, and the crack continues downward into the rock, into the dark, to a depth that no instrument has fully measured and no eye has seen. Between the pores, an eastern shaft lies beneath an iron grate from the 1920s restoration. On the north side sits what the archaeologist Mark Lehner has called the keyhole shaft, approximately 1.5 meters by 1 meter and about 2 meters deep, containing a large piece of polished basalt that Lehner interpreted as evidence of an unfinished tomb. The basalt is anomalous in itself. Basalt is not native to the Giza plateau. It was brought from somewhere else, shaped, polished, and placed in this small shaft in the body of the Sphinx. By whom and for what purpose, and at what point in the monument's long history, the record does not say. And then there is the Rump Passage, Shaft D, rediscovered in 1980 after 3 elderly men, former basket carriers who had worked with berets in the 1920s, recalled its existence and pointed to its location. The passage descends crudely into the bedrock beneath the hindquarters, reaching the water table at about 4 meters. Cup-shaped footholds line the walls. Modern debris was found near the bottom. Its original purpose remains unknown. Picture that for a moment. 3 old men, their working lives spent in the dust of the Giza plateau, carrying stone and debris for a French engineer's restoration campaign, remembering half a century later that there was a passage in the rock, pointing to where it was and being proven right. The Sphinx keeps its own memory, passed down through human bodies, through the hands and feet of workers whose names never entered the official record. There is something deeply moving about this, the great monument, studied by scholars and photographed by millions, remembered in its most intimate detail by the men who carried baskets in its shadow. Knowledge is not always where we expect to find it. Between 1978 and 1998, Hawass and Lehner reportedly rediscovered access to several large, apparently natural caves beneath the Sphinx, with evidence of earlier ancient excavation. No artifacts were recovered. The caves are consistent with the underlying limestone geology, which is naturally prone to dissolution cavities, to voids formed when ancient water moved through soluble rock and left empty space behind. The Giza Plateau sits atop a formation that was once submerged, that was shaped by water for millions of years before it became the dry limestone shelf we know today. Water is a patient sculptor. It leaves its work in the dark, where no one sees it, hollowing and dissolving and creating spaces that the rock itself does not know it contains. But the evidence of ancient modification, of human hands shaping what nature had begun, suggests that the Egyptians who built and maintained the Sphinx knew about these natural features and made deliberate choices about them. They explored them. They may have utilized them. They certainly modified them. They took what the earth had already created and made it into something more deliberate, something intentional, something that served a purpose we can no longer fully reconstruct. And then they sealed them. The Sphinx bears the marks of at least 4 major ancient restoration campaigns layered in its masonry veneer. The oldest repairs, using large blocks in a style consistent with Old Kingdom masonry, may date to within centuries of the monument's original carving. A second phase corresponds to New Kingdom restorations associated with Thutmose IV, who famously cleared the sand that had buried the Sphinx to its neck and erected the dream stele between its paws, recording how the Sphinx had appeared to him in a vision and promised him the throne of Egypt in exchange for his labor. Consider what it means that the Sphinx was already buried to its neck during the New Kingdom, already requiring excavation and restoration, already accumulating the sand that would cover and uncover it in cycles across the centuries. The monument was ancient when Thutmose IV dreamed of it. It was already a relic of an earlier time. A third phase dates to the 26th dynasty, the Sate period, when a wave of deliberate archaism swept through Egyptian culture, a civilization consciously looking backward, trying to recover something it felt it had lost. The Sate pharaohs dressed their monuments in Old Kingdom styles. They copied Old Kingdom texts. They restored Old Kingdom temples. They were doing in stone and pigment what we do in archives and libraries, reaching back through time for something that felt more complete, more whole, more true than what the present offered. A fourth phase reflects Roman-era attention to the monument during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, when the Sphinx had already become ancient history, even to the people who maintained it. Each phase implies that restorers had access to the monument's shafts and fissures. Each phase implies that decisions were made about which openings to seal and which to leave accessible. The modern configuration of passages is not original. It reflects accumulated human decisions across 3,000 years of restoration and concealment, preservation and forgetting. The Sphinx we see today is not the Sphinx that was first carved. It is the Sphinx as it has been shaped and reshaped by every civilization that encountered it and felt compelled to leave its mark. So when we ask what is under the Sphinx, we are not asking a simple geological question. We are asking a question about what was known, what was hidden, what was forgotten, and what was deliberately kept from reaching the surface. We are asking about the archaeology of concealment itself. We are asking about the decisions made by human beings across 3 millennia to open certain doors and close others, to investigate certain spaces and seal others, to preserve certain knowledge and let other knowledge dissolve back into the rock. Now let us talk about what the instruments found. The first major scientific investigation of the Sphinx's subsurface came in 1974, when a senior research physicist named Lambert Dolphin arrived at Giza from SRI International, a research institution in Menlo Park, California, that had grown out of Stanford University. His expertise was in electromagnetic propagation and remote sensing technologies originally developed for military applications during the Cold War. The Cold War had produced extraordinary tools for seeing through things, for detecting what lay beneath surfaces without touching them. Radar systems developed to detect underground bunkers, electromagnetic sensors designed to find buried cables and tunnels, technologies born from the anxiety of superpower conflict, now being turned toward the older anxieties of human history. Dolphin brought those tools to Giza, His team employed resistivity measurements, magnetometry, and ground-penetrating radar, then a relatively new technology for archaeological use. The 1977 report noted anomalies behind the rear pores, suggesting a northwest to southeast tunnel, plus deep anomalies in front of the pores. The technology of the mid-1970s was limited. The radar systems had restricted depth penetration and resolution, but the surveys detected clear anomalies, zones where subsurface properties differed markedly from surrounding rock. Something was down there that was different from the limestone around it. The instruments could not say what. They could only say that something was different. In 19s, the team drilled 5 4-inch bore holes at the strongest anomaly locations and inspected each with a downhole television camera. Every anomaly proved to be natural cracks and fissures. Dolphin declared the question a dead issue. But here is where the story becomes genuinely complicated, genuinely strange, in a way that will colour everything that follows. The funding for Dolphin's survey came largely from Hugh Lynn Case, son of the American psychic Edgar Case, who had died in 1945. And Edgar Case had made a very specific prophecy about the Sphinx. Case was perhaps the most famous psychic in American history, known as the Sleeping Prophet because he would enter a trance state and deliver what he called readings, diagnoses, and prescriptions for the sick, past life narratives, prophecies about the future. He claimed to access what he called the Akashic Record, a kind of cosmic archive of all human experience. He had no formal education beyond the 9th grade. He had no training in history or archaeology, and yet his readings, delivered between roughly 1923 and 1904, described in considerable detail a civilization he called Atlantis, which he claimed had existed in the Atlantic Ocean and had been destroyed in a catastrophic flood. More specifically, Case claimed that survivors of this Atlantean civilization had migrated to Egypt and had built, or helped to build, the monuments of the Giza Plateau. And more specifically still, he claimed that these survivors had hidden a repository of their knowledge beneath the Sphinx. He called it the Hall of Records. He said it would be discovered between 1906 and 1998. He said it would contain the entire history of Atlantis, preserved in some material form, waiting for a time when humanity was ready to receive it. Now, let us be careful here. Let us be precise about what we are doing and what we are not doing. The Atlantis hypothesis, as it is sometimes called, is not supported by archaeological evidence. No physical evidence of an advanced prehistorical civilization of the kind Case described has ever been found. The pyramids and the Sphinx are extraordinary achievements, but they are comprehensible within the context of ancient Egyptian civilization as we understand it. They do not require an Atlantean origin to explain them. Case was a sincere man who genuinely believed in what he was doing, and he helped many people who came to him in distress. But sincerity is not the same as accuracy, and belief is not the same as evidence. And yet the Casey prophecy has shaped the investigation of the Sphinx's subsurface in ways that cannot be ignored, because it provided the funding and the motivation for the earliest scientific surveys, because it created an atmosphere of prophetic expectation around the data those surveys produced, and because it entangled legitimate scientific questions with claims that most archaeologists found embarrassing to be associated with. The result has been a kind of contamination, where the genuine anomalies detected by rigorous instruments have been tainted by association with prophecy, making it easier for mainstream Egyptology to dismiss the entire question rather than engage carefully with the parts that deserve careful engagement. This is worth sitting with. The instruments found something real. The data is not in dispute. What is in dispute is what the data means, and the dispute has been shaped not only by evidence, but by the social and political dynamics of who was asking the question and why. Legitimate science and prophetic expectation arrived at the same site with the same instruments and produced findings that neither camp could fully claim. The believers pointed to the anomalies as confirmation. The skeptics pointed to the believers as contamination, and the anomalies themselves, patient and indifferent, continued to exist in the rock regardless of what anyone made of them. I'm curious what you think about that entanglement. If you have encountered a similar pattern in other ancient sites or other buried histories where legitimate scientific questions got tangled up with something that made the establishment look away, tell me about it in the comments. The archive learns from the people who keep returning to it. 9 years after Dolphin's survey, a team from Waseda University in Tokyo, led by Professor Sakuji Yoshimura, conducted electromagnetic sounding surveys at Giza, a significant improvement in methodology. The Japanese researchers had developed techniques offering better resolution than Dolphin's resistivity methods. Their surveys were systematic, with dense sampling grids covering the entire Sphinx enclosure. Crucially, Yoshimura's team was not searching for any prophesied chamber. They were conducting a broader survey of Giza's monuments and had previously applied the same techniques to the pyramids, to the surrounding causeways, to the valley temples. Their agenda was straightforwardly scientific. They brought no prophecy with them. They brought instruments and methodology and the patient discipline of academic research. Their data detected 3 features: a hollow 2.5 to 3 meters underground on the south side, a similar groove on the north side, suggesting a possible connecting tunnel, and a geometric cavity between the front paws, roughly 1.5 by 3 meters at a depth of 1 to 2 meters, extending east to west toward the chest. Zahi Hawass, then Chief Inspector at Giza, summarized the findings by noting that the sanctuary of the Sphinx contains more cavities below it than were previously known. This was an official acknowledgement, in an official capacity, that the ground beneath the Sphinx held undiscovered features. It was made years before Hawass would become the towering, controversial figure who would later publicly dismiss claims about subsurface anomalies. In this earlier moment, he was simply a scientist reading data, and the data said that the ground held more than anyone had previously mapped. The geometric cavity between the front paws sits directly beneath the location described in Casey's readings as the entrance to the Hall of Records. This correspondence may be entirely coincidental. The area between the front paws is where the bedrock is closest to the surface and where construction activity associated with the Sphinx temple has most significantly disturbed the subsurface. Natural features in that location are not surprising, but the correspondence has made this particular anomaly a lightning rod, drawing the energy of believers and the defensiveness of skeptics in equal measure, making clear-eyed evaluation nearly impossible. The geometry of the anomaly, its regularity, its east-west orientation, its position directly between the outstretched paws of the monument, has fed interpretations that range from the mundane to the extraordinary, and the absence of direct investigation has allowed all of those interpretations to persist simultaneously. None of them confirmed, none of them refuted. The Waseda survey was published in a university monograph series rather than a peer-reviewed journal. Its findings were never independently replicated or directly investigated through drilling. They exist in the archive, documented but unconfirmed, a detection without a resolution. Another voice added to the chorus of instruments saying, "Something is here, something is different, something in the rock does not match what surrounds it." And then came 1991. Thomas Dobecki was a seismologist. Robert Schoch was a geologist from Boston University. Their collaboration brought together expertise in seismic methodology and geological interpretation in a combination that was more rigorous than any previous investigation of the Sphinx's subsurface. Dobecki collected 19 separate refraction profiles spaced at intervals around the entire enclosure. 19 profiles. Not a cursory pass, a systematic, careful, comprehensive mapping of the seismic properties of the rock beneath the monument and its surrounding area. Seismic refraction measures the speed at which shock waves travel through rock. Intact, dense limestone transmits waves quickly. Fractured, weathered, or void-containing rock transmits them more slowly. The survey could not only detect anomalies, but characterize them with greater precision than electromagnetic methods. It could measure the depth of features. It could estimate their size. It could compare the properties of different areas and identify where the rock behaved differently from its surroundings. It was, in short, the most sophisticated investigation of the Sphinx's subsurface that had ever been attempted. The survey revealed two critical findings, and it is important to understand that these two findings are actually separate questions that have become entangled with each other in the public imagination. The first finding was about weathering. The subsurface weathering beneath the enclosure floor was non-uniform. 6 to 8 feet deep along the sides and front of the Sphinx, but only about 4 feet deep at the rear. Schoch interpreted this as evidence that the front and sides had been exposed to precipitation-driven weathering, specifically to rainfall, for a significantly longer period than the rear, suggesting that the Sphinx's main body predated the conventional 4th dynasty attribution by thousands of years. The rear, he argued, had been carved later, perhaps during the reign of Khafra, as mainstream Egyptology maintains, while the front and sides preserved an older core. This interpretation, the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis ignited a controversy that has never fully subsided. Schoch presented his findings at the 1992 annual meeting of the Geological Society of America, and the response from Egyptologists was swift and largely dismissive. The geologist John Anthony West, who had first brought the water erosion question to Schoch's attention, had long argued that the distinctive undulating erosion pattern on the Sphinx's body was inconsistent with wind and sand erosion and consistent with heavy rainfall. Mainstream Egyptology countered that the geological evidence was ambiguous, that the last period of significant rainfall in the Nile Valley occurred before any plausible date for the Sphinx's construction, and that the erosion pattern could be explained by other mechanisms, including chemical weathering and the action of ancient flood waters. The debate continues. It is a genuine scientific disagreement, not a simple matter of conspiracy or suppression. Reasonable, well-qualified people look at the same stone and reach different conclusions. Geologists who study the monument see different things in the erosion patterns than Egyptologists do. Climatologists who study ancient North African weather patterns reach different conclusions than geologists who study the rock itself. The question of when the Sphinx was carved is genuinely open in ways that the official narrative does not always acknowledge. What is not in genuine dispute is the second finding, the large low-velocity anomaly beneath the left front paw, 12 meters by 9 meters at approximately 5 meters depth, plus additional cavities along the south flank and between the paws. The void was not a single data point. It was a consistent feature across multiple adjacent profiles. Its boundaries were relatively sharp, suggesting a discrete feature rather than a gradual transition in rock properties. Schoch's interpretation that the void was ostensibly man-made was based on that regularity and sharpness, features that could imply excavated spaces rather than the irregular boundaries more typical of natural dissolution cavities in limestone. The word ostensibly is important here. Schoch was not claiming certainty. He was noting that the characteristics of the anomaly were more consistent with excavation than with natural dissolution, while acknowledging that the data alone could not settle the question. This interpretation remains inferential. Sharp boundary natural voids are less common, but not impossible, in karst environments, where water-dissolving limestone over millennia can create remarkably regular-looking spaces. The seismic data cannot by itself distinguish between a natural void and an excavated chamber. Only direct investigation can make that distinction, and direct investigation has never been permitted. The survey was published in Geoarchaeology, a peer-reviewed journal, in 1992. It remains, over 3 decades later, the only peer-reviewed geophysical study of the Sphinx's subsurface ever to appear in a scientific journal. No borehole has been drilled into the void. No camera has been lowered. No human being has laid eyes on whatever that space contains or does not contain. 34 years of silence applied to a peer-reviewed detection. Imagine being a scientist. Imagine publishing a finding in a respected journal, a finding that has been reviewed by your peers and found methodologically sound, a finding that describes a previously unknown space beneath one of the most famous structures in human history. Imagine watching 34 years pass without anyone being permitted to follow up on that finding. Imagine writing the paper. Imagine submitting it. Imagine the peer reviewers reading it and finding no flaw in the methodology, no error in the data, no reason to reject the finding. Imagine the paper being published, entering the scientific record, becoming a citation in subsequent work, and then imagine the silence that accumulates around it. Not refutation, not replication, not investigation, just silence. The kind of silence that feels deliberate even when it might be merely bureaucratic. Now let us talk about why. The reason is not simple, and it is not what most people assume. It is not merely bureaucratic caution. It is not merely conservation concern. Though the Sphinx is genuinely fragile, its limestone weathered and cracked, its restoration masonry in constant need of attention. The real story involves a web of personalities and politics and prophecy that has made the Sphinx not just an archaeological site, but a contested symbol, a place where the boundaries of official knowledge are actively policed. At the center of that web stands one figure, Zahi Hawass. To understand Hawass is to understand something essential about the archaeology of Egypt in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. He is not a villain. He is not a simple gatekeeper hiding obvious truth. He is something more complicated and more interesting than either of those things. He is a man who genuinely loves Egyptian antiquities with a passion that is unmistakable and authentic, who has done real and important work to protect and document the monuments of his country, and who has also exercised extraordinary personal control over access to those monuments in ways that have made independent scientific investigation effectively impossible. Hawass served as Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities from 2002 to 2011, a period during which he was essentially the single most powerful figure in Egyptian archaeology. Before that, he had been director of the Giza Plateau for years. He controlled who received permits to work at Giza. He controlled what findings could be published. He controlled the narrative. He was, in the most literal sense, the person who decided what questions could be asked and what questions could not. And he had a complicated, deeply personal relationship with the case legacy. Hawass had received his doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania, and his American education had brought him into contact with the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the organization founded to promote Edgar Cayce's work. The ARE had funded his fellowship. This connection, which Hawass has been open about, created a situation of almost impossible complexity. The organization that had funded his education was the same organization most invested in finding the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx. When Hawass later became the gatekeeper for Sphinx access, his relationship with the ARE became a source of both opportunity and suspicion. He owed a professional debt to the people most likely to embarrass mainstream Egyptology with their claims. He was the guardian of a monument that those same people had made into a symbol of hidden knowledge. The position was untenable, and he navigated it in ways that satisfied no one entirely. In 1996, a live Fox television broadcast titled The Mystery of the Sphinx, watched by approximately 10 million people, promised to reveal what lay beneath the monument. Hawass participated. The broadcast was largely staged. A camera was lowered into an existing shaft between the pores, not into the void detected by Dobecki, and found nothing unexpected. Viewers who had been promised revelation watched a camera descend into empty limestone and come back up again. The broadcast was a turning point. It crystallized the public sense that something was being managed, that the investigation of the Sphinx's subsurface was being controlled, not to protect the monument, but to protect something else. The sense of theatrical misdirection, of a camera lowered into the wrong hole in front of 10 million witnesses, did more to fuel conspiracy than any actual concealment could have. People who had never thought seriously about the Sphinx before watched that broadcast and came away with the feeling that they had witnessed a performance of investigation rather than investigation itself. That feeling has never entirely dissipated. Between 1996 and 1999, a team funded by the Schor Foundation, established by a man named Joseph Schor, who was a lifetime member of the ARE, conducted surveys at Giza using seismic equipment and ground-penetrating radar over multiple field seasons. The team claimed in April 1996 to have found rooms and tunnels in front of and behind the Sphinx. In 1987, ground-penetrating radar reportedly detected an open area 30 feet below the surface, estimated at 26 by 40 feet, directly beneath the monument. When the Supreme Council of Antiquities permitted a test drill near the Great Pyramid in 1998, it revealed only a natural cavity. Permission for further drilling was denied. The full data set from the Schor Foundation's surveys has never been published. The findings exist in press releases and conference presentations and second-hand accounts, but the raw data, the numbers, the profiles, the methodology has never been made available for independent evaluation. In conventional science, unpublished claims carry no evidentiary weight. They cannot be evaluated, replicated, or challenged. The Schor Foundation's findings exist in a liminal state between data and rumor, cited by alternative researchers as evidence of hidden chambers and dismissed by mainstream archaeologists as unsubstantiated claims from a team with an obvious ideological agenda. Both positions are defensible. Neither is conclusive. And here is where we arrive at the deepest layer of this particular mystery. Not the void beneath the left front paw, though we will return to that. The deeper mystery is epistemological. It is about how we know what we know, and who gets to decide what counts as knowledge. Consider the situation as it stands. 5 separate scientific teams have aimed instruments at the ground beneath the Sphinx. All 5 detected anomalies. The most rigorous of these detections, the Dobecki Seismic Survey of 1991, was published in a peer-reviewed journal and has never been scientifically refuted. The void it detected has never been investigated. Every formal request to investigate has been denied by the Egyptian government, first under Hawass and continuing under his successors. The official explanation for these denials has shifted over the years. Conservation concerns, structural integrity, the need to protect the monument from damage. These are not unreasonable concerns. The Sphinx is genuinely fragile. Drilling into its subsurface carries real risks. But the same conservation concerns have not prevented drilling in other parts of the Giza Plateau, including the test drill near the Great Pyramid in 1998 that the Supreme Council itself permitted. The consistency of refusal, specifically regarding the Sphinx's subsurface anomalies, is difficult to explain entirely on conservation grounds. There is another explanation that deserves consideration, one that is less dramatic than hidden chambers, but perhaps more psychologically revealing. The Egyptian government may be refusing access, not because it knows what is down there and wants to hide it, but because it does not know what is down there and cannot control what finding out might mean. Think about this carefully. If the void beneath the left front paw is a natural geological feature, then opening it to investigation settles nothing and satisfies no one. The case believers will say the real Hall of Records is somewhere else. The alternative history community will find another anomaly to focus on. But if the void contains something unexpected, something that does not fit the conventional narrative of Egyptian history, the consequences are uncontrollable. Not because the truth would be suppressed, but because the interpretive chaos that would follow any discovery could not be managed. Egypt's relationship with its ancient monuments is not merely academic. It is economic, political, deeply tied to national identity and to the tourism revenue that the monuments generate. The Sphinx is not just an archaeological site, it is a symbol, and symbols are fragile in ways that limestone is not. The Egyptian government has watched what happens when the Sphinx becomes a focal point for alternative history claims. It has watched the Fox television broadcast and its aftermath. It has watched the case community pour money and energy into the plateau. It has watched scholars and pseudoscientists and journalists and tourists all converge on the monument with their own agendas and their own expectations. And it has concluded, perhaps rationally, that the safest course is to leave the void uninvestigated, to maintain the uncertainty rather than resolve it into something that might be even harder to manage. This is not a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It is something more mundane and in some ways more troubling. It is institutional self-protection in the face of genuine uncertainty. It is the decision to preserve a controlled unknown rather than risk an uncontrolled known. But let us not leave the older thread unexamined, because it is older than any of this, older than Casey's prophecy, older than the modern archaeology of the Giza Plateau, and it winds through the archive in ways that are genuinely strange. The ancient Sumerians, who lived in what is now southern Iraq and who produced some of the oldest written texts in human history, described in their mythological literature a being they called the Lamassu, a protective entity typically depicted as a creature with a human head and the body of a lion or bull, placed at the entrances to temples and palaces and important places to guard what lay within. The lamassu was not merely decorative. In Sumerian theological understanding, it was an active guardian, a spiritual and physical protector of the threshold between ordinary space and sacred space. It stood at the boundary between the world that people move through freely and the world that required permission, preparation, worthiness. The connection to the Sphinx is not my invention. Scholars of comparative mythology have noted the correspondence for decades. The Sphinx sits at the entrance to the Giza Plateau, at the threshold between the world of the living and the funerary complex of the kings. It faces east, toward the rising sun, toward the beginning of things. It guards something. The question is what? The Sumerian texts that describe these guardian figures also describe, in the Epic of Gilgamesh and in older flood narratives that predate the biblical account of Noah, a great deluge that destroyed an earlier civilization. In the Gilgamesh epic, the flood hero Utnapishtim preserves not only human life, but knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of the world before the flood, carried forward through catastrophe into the world that follows. The preservation of knowledge across catastrophe is one of the oldest themes in human storytelling. It appears in cultures that had no contact with each other. It surfaces in texts separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles. The idea of preserved antediluvian knowledge, of wisdom hidden before a great flood and waiting to be recovered afterward, is not unique to Case. It is ancient. It appears in Sumerian texts, in Egyptian texts, in Platonic philosophy, in multiple cultural traditions that had no contact with each other. The persistence of this idea across cultures and millennia is itself a kind of evidence. Not evidence that such a repository exists, but evidence that human beings across many cultures have felt that something was lost, that what we have is a fragment of something larger, that somewhere in the deep past there was a fullness of understanding that time and catastrophe have reduced to echoes. Consider the Egyptian texts themselves. The inventory stela discovered at Giza in the 19th century claims that the Sphinx predated the pharaoh Khufu, who is conventionally credited with building the Great Pyramid. If accurate, this would push the Sphinx's construction back beyond the 4th dynasty, into a period from which we have far less documentation, far fewer records, far more silence. Mainstream Egyptology has largely dismissed the inventory stelae as a later fabrication, a new kingdom or Sa'ite period text dressed up to look older. But the dismissal has not been unanimous, and the stele remains in the archive, another document that does not quite fit the official narrative, another anomaly waiting for resolution. The Sphinx sits at the center of this feeling. It is the world's most famous guardian, and it is guarding something. Whether that something is a literal chamber filled with ancient records, or the memory of a lost civilization preserved in stone and symbol, or simply the irreducible mystery of human origins and human achievement, it guards it with extraordinary effectiveness. Consider what the monument actually is, stripped of all the layers of interpretation and controversy. It is a human face carved into the living rock of a plateau, looking east at a scale that required the coordinated labor of hundreds or thousands of people over years or decades. It was built by whoever built it and whenever they built it, with the clear intention that it would last. Not for generations, for ages. The limestone of the Giza Plateau does not erode quickly. The builders of the Sphinx were building for a timescale that exceeds the entire span of recorded human history. What does it mean to build something designed to last 10,000 years? What does it mean to carve a face into the rock of the earth and orient it toward the sunrise and place it at the entrance to your most sacred precinct? It means you are trying to communicate something across a gulf of time so vast that no language could survive it. You are leaving a message in stone because stone is the only medium that might endure long enough to reach whoever comes after. And we have come after. We are here. We are looking at the face in the rock and asking what it means. And the ground beneath the left front paw is saying something in the language of seismic waves and electromagnetic anomalies, in the only language it has available to it, and we are not being permitted to listen. In 2001, a ground-penetrating radar survey near the left front paw detected planar surfaces interpretable as either a tunnel or natural fractures. The ambiguity of that phrase, either a tunnel or natural fractures, encapsulates the entire problem. Every instrument aimed at the Sphinx's subsurface has detected something. No instrument has been able to distinguish with certainty between geological features and possible man-made structures. The only way to make that distinction is direct investigation, and direct investigation has been consistently refused. In 2024, a Japanese-Egyptian team from Tohoku University found an L-shaped underground anomaly near Giza's Western Cemetery using ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography. The anomaly was published in an archaeological journal. It was described as potentially significant. It was not investigated further. The pattern repeats: detection, publication, silence. There is something almost meditative about this pattern when you sit with it long enough. The earth keeps speaking. The instruments keep listening. The data keeps accumulating. And the space between detection and investigation keeps widening, filling with time and politics and the accumulated weight of everything that the Sphinx has come to mean to everyone who has ever looked at it and wondered. What mysteries keep you awake at night? What buried questions do you find yourself returning to? The ones that official history seems content to leave unanswered. Tell me in the comments. Those are the files the archive most wants to open. Let us think about what it would mean if the void beneath the left front paw is exactly what the most conservative interpretation suggests: a natural dissolution cavity in the limestone. A space created by ancient water moving through soluble rock, with no human modification, no artifacts, no records, nothing but empty stone and the silence of 50 million years. Even this would be significant. Even a natural void of that size, in that location, would tell us something important about the geology of the Giza Plateau, about the hydrological history of the region, about the conditions under which the Sphinx was carved and has been maintained. It would tell us how the rock behaved, how water moved through it, what the plateau looked like from the inside before human hands ever touched its surface. It would settle a question that has been open for 34 years. It would allow the scientific community to move on to other questions with the benefit of actual data rather than accumulated speculation. And yet, even this minimal resolution has been refused. The refusal to investigate is itself a kind of statement. It says that the uncertainty is preferable to the resolution. It says that whatever the void contains, whether it is a natural cavity or an ancient chamber or something that fits neither category neatly, the Egyptian government has decided that the known unknown is safer than the unknown unknown. The void is a controlled uncertainty. Once it is opened, it becomes uncontrolled. Whatever is down there, it is safer as a question than as an answer. This is a very human calculation. We make it all the time. We leave certain doors closed not because we know what is behind them, but because we cannot predict what opening them might change. The Sphinx's void is an extreme case of a very ordinary human tendency. The tendency to prefer the mystery we understand to the reality we cannot predict. But there is something that makes this particular closed door different from most. The monument in which it sits is not private property. It is not a military installation. It is not a classified archive. It is one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a monument that belongs in some meaningful sense to all of humanity, not only to the nation-state that happens to contain it within its borders. The question of who has the right to decide that a peer-reviewed scientific detection will go uninvestigated for 3 decades is not a simple question of national sovereignty. It is a question about the ownership of human history. This is not an argument for scientific imperialism, for Western institutions to override Egyptian authority over Egyptian monuments. The history of Western archaeology in Egypt is not a history to be proud of. The looting and removal of artifacts, the colonial assumption that European and American scholars had the right to excavate and export the heritage of other cultures, the systematic marginalization of Egyptian scholars in the study of Egyptian history. All of this is real, and its effects persist. Egyptian sovereignty over the Giza Plateau is legitimate and important, but sovereignty is not the same as secrecy. And the right to control access to a monument is not the same as the right to prevent scientific investigation of that monument indefinitely. The scientific community has a legitimate interest in the data that instruments have collected. The public has a legitimate interest in knowing what the ground beneath the Sphinx contains. These interests do not disappear because they are politically inconvenient. What would it take to resolve this? What would it actually require to answer the question that 5 scientific teams have raised, and none has been permitted to answer? The technology exists. Ground-penetrating radar has improved dramatically since the 1990s. Seismic tomography can now produce 3-dimensional images of subsurface features with resolution that was unimaginable when Dobeki conducted his survey. Muon tomography, the same technology used to peer inside the Great Pyramid and detect previously unknown chambers, could be applied to the Sphinx's subsurface with extraordinary precision. A modern investigation conducted with current technology and with the full cooperation of Egyptian authorities, could characterize the void beneath the left front paw without drilling a single hole. It could determine whether the boundaries of the void are consistent with natural dissolution or with excavation. It could detect whether the void is empty or contains fill material. It could produce a three-dimensional map of every anomalous feature beneath the monument and its enclosure. And if the non-invasive imaging suggested that direct investigation was warranted, a single carefully placed borehole smaller than the ones Dolphin drilled in 19 would resolve the matter definitively. A camera, the diameter of a finger, a fiber optic light, an hour of careful work. 34 years of silence ended. The technology is not the obstacle. The political will is the obstacle. And the political will is shaped by everything we have discussed: the case legacy, the Fox television debacle, the entanglement of legitimate science with prophetic expectation, the institutional defensiveness of Egyptian archaeology, the fear of what resolution might mean for the narrative of the Sphinx and for the tourism and the national pride that narrative supports. There is a particular irony in the fact that the monument most associated with mystery and hidden knowledge is being kept mysterious not by ancient design, but by modern bureaucracy. Whatever the builders of the Sphinx intended, they did not intend this. They did not carve a face into the rock and orient it toward the sunrise, so that 34 years later, a peer-reviewed scientific detection would be filed away and forgotten. They were trying to communicate across time. We are refusing to receive the transmission, or perhaps we are receiving it in our own way. Perhaps the void beneath the left front paw is already communicating something, not through its contents, which remain unknown, but through the reaction it has provoked, the scrambling of scientists and psychics and politicians and television producers around a hole in the ground that no one has seen. The accumulation of data without resolution. The way the question keeps returning, keeps surfacing, keeps demanding attention across decades and across the boundaries of disciplines and cultures and ideological commitments. Perhaps what the Sphinx is guarding is not a physical archive, but a question. The question of what we are willing to know. The question of whether we can separate our need for the mystery from our need for the answer. The question of whether the search itself, the patient accumulation of evidence and the willingness to sit with uncertainty is more valuable than any discovery could be. This is not a comfortable conclusion. It is not the kind of resolution that satisfies the part of us that wants the chamber opened and the contents catalogued and the mystery resolved. But it is honest, and there is something to be said in the quiet hours for honesty that does not pretend to know more than it knows. Let us return now to the beginning, to the question that opened this file. There is a space beneath the left front paw of the Great Sphinx of Giza that measures roughly 12 meters by 9 meters at a depth of 5 meters. 5 separate scientific teams have aimed instruments at the ground and found it. Not one of them has ever been permitted to look inside. We know this now with more context than we had when we first heard it. We know that the Sphinx is not a sealed monolith, but a layered monument, with a complex history of openings and sealings and restoration. We know that the void was detected by rigorous seismic methods and published in a peer-reviewed journal. We know that subsequent surveys have added additional anomalies to the picture: a geometric cavity between the pores, grooves on the north and south flanks, an L-shaped anomaly in the surrounding area. We know that the refusal to investigate these findings is shaped by the entanglement of legitimate science with prophetic expectation, by the personality and politics of the most powerful figure in Egyptian archaeology of the late 20th century, by institutional defensiveness and the fear of uncontrollable consequences. We know all of this, and the void is still there. The limestone of the Giza Plateau does not care about any of this. It holds what it holds with the indifference of 50 million years. The seismic waves still travel more slowly through that 12 by 9 meter space than through the surrounding rock. The anomaly is still anomalous. The question is still open, and the Sphinx still faces east toward the rising sun with its worn and patient face, guarding something that may be a natural cavity in the rock, or an ancient chamber, or the memory of a civilization that preceded everything we think we know, or simply the irreducible fact of human curiosity confronting human mystery across an abyss of time. The ancient Sumerians placed their guardian figures at thresholds, at the entrances to temples and palaces and sacred spaces. The Lamassu stood between the ordinary world and the world where important things were kept, between the known and the unknown, between the profane and the sacred. It did not hide what lay beyond it. It simply marked the boundary. It said, "Here is where the ordinary world ends. What lies beyond requires your full attention. Approach with care." The Sphinx has been marking that boundary for somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 years, perhaps considerably longer. Every civilization that has encountered it has felt the weight of what it marks. The New Kingdom pharaohs who cleared the sand and restored the masonry. The Roman tourists who carved their names into its flanks. The medieval scholars who called it the Father of Terror. The French soldiers who, according to legend, though probably not in fact, used it for target practice. The case believers who funded scientific surveys looking for Atlantean archives. The seismologist who placed 19 instruments around its base and found a void. All of them standing at the threshold. All of them feeling the weight of what lies beyond. All of them, in their different ways, asking the same question. What is under the Sphinx? The honest answer, the answer that the archive actually supports, is that we do not know. We know that something is there. We know it is approximately 12 meters by 9 meters at a depth of 5 meters. We know its boundaries are relatively sharp. We know it has never been directly investigated. Everything beyond that is inference and interpretation, and the projection of our own expectations onto an empty space in the rock. But consider what it means that we do not know. Consider that in the 21st century, with all the instruments and all the technology and all the accumulated knowledge of modern science, The ground beneath the most famous statue on Earth contains a documented unknown, a space that instruments have found and eyes have never seen. A question that has been asked and has not been answered. There is something quietly extraordinary about this. In an age when satellite imagery can read the license plate of a car from orbit, when genomic sequencing can reconstruct the face of a person dead for thousands of years, when ground-penetrating radar can map the foundations of buried cities from the surface, the void beneath the left front paw of the Great Sphinx remains unknown. Not because the technology to investigate it does not exist, because the permission to investigate it has not been granted. The archive is not always closed by ignorance. Sometimes it is closed by choice. And perhaps that is the most human thing about this entire story. The Sphinx was built by human beings, maintained and restored by human beings across 3 millennia, investigated by human beings with increasingly sophisticated instruments, and kept mysterious by human beings making institutional and political calculations about what knowledge is safe to have. From beginning to end, it is a human story, a story about what we build and what we protect and what we hide and what we refuse to look at directly. The void waits. It has been waiting for at least 34 years since its detection, and for whatever time preceded that detection, stretching back to whenever it was formed, whether by water moving through soluble rock over millennia, or by human hands cutting into the bedrock with bronze or copper tools in the age when the monument was new. It is patient in the way that stone is patient, which is to say, absolutely, which is to say, on a time scale that makes human impatience feel very small. Somewhere beneath the left front paw of the Great Sphinx of Giza, in the cool dark of the limestone, something waits. The seismic waves have spoken, the instruments have recorded. The data sits in a journal published in 1992, cited and unchallenged and uninvestigated. And the Sphinx still faces east, still marks the threshold, still guards whatever it guards with the patient indifference of 50 million years of stone. Maybe that is what they were trying to tell us. Not that there is a chamber full of ancient records waiting to be opened, but that some thresholds are not meant to be crossed easily, that some questions are not meant to be answered quickly, that the act of guarding something, of marking a boundary and saying, "Here is where the ordinary world ends," is itself a form of knowledge, a form of teaching, a form of communication across the abyss of time. Or maybe the void is a natural cavity in the limestone, and the most famous archaeological mystery of the modern era will resolve into geology, and the Sphinx will continue to face east with its patient expression, having guarded nothing more dramatic than the slow dissolution of ancient rock by ancient water. We do not know. We are not permitted to know. And in the quiet hours, sitting with that uncertainty, there is something that feels less like frustration and more like the particular piece of a question that has been held long enough to become comfortable. The not knowing has its own texture, its own weight, its own kind of truth. If this file has stayed with you, if it has settled into that particular place where questions live that refuse to leave quietly, consider sharing it with someone who keeps similar hours, someone who finds themselves awake when the rest of the world is sleeping, turning over the same kinds of buried things. When you pass this along, you are doing something small, but not insignificant. You are preserving a question that deserves to be remembered, connecting another seeker to a mystery that has waited long enough in silence, building this quiet community of people who believe that the things history leaves unanswered are worth sitting with together. The archive grows stronger when more people know it is here. The archive is not always what it contains. Sometimes the archive is the silence around the thing that cannot be opened, the space between the detection and the investigation, the 34 years of a question held open like a door that no one has been allowed to walk through. The void is still there, the instruments have spoken, and somewhere in the cool dark beneath the limestone, the question waits for an answer that may or may not ever come. Until then, the Sphinx faces east. The sun rises over the plateau. The seismic waves travel more slowly through that 12 by 9 meter space than through the surrounding rock. And the archive remains open, patient, waiting for the night shift to end and the next question to begin. If you found yourself drawn into this particular file tonight, leave a comment and tell me where you are in the world and what time it is for you. There is something I find quietly remarkable about the fact that people in 100 different time zones, in 100 different darknesses, might be sitting with this same question at this same moment. All of us looking toward the same distant monument. All of us held by the same patient mystery. Subscribe if you want to keep returning to the archive. There are more files. There are always more files. The tablets still whisper through the dust. The clay remembers what we have forgotten, and the void beneath the left front paw of the Great Sphinx of Giza holds whatever it holds, in the dark, in the silence, in the cool, indifferent limestone of the Giza plateau. Rest now. The question will still be there in the morning,